Know the facts on the enigmatic men-at-arms behind ancient Rome's most notorious form of entertainment. Here's 8 things you should know about Roman gladiators. Number 1. They weren't always enslaved. Not all gladiators were brought to the arena in chains. While most early combatants were enslaved peoples and people who had committed crimes, grave inscriptions show that by the 1st century AD, the demographics had started to change. Lured by the thrill of battle and the roar of the crowds, scores of freemen began voluntarily signing contracts with gladiator schools in the hopes of winning glory and prize money. These freelance warriors were often desperate men or ex-soldiers skilled in fighting. But some were upper-class participants, knights, and even senators eager to demonstrate their warrior pedigree. Number 2. Gladiatorial bouts were originally part of funeral ceremonies. Many ancient chronicles describe the Roman games as an import from the Etruscans, but most historians now argue that gladiator fights got their start as a blood rite staged at the funerals of wealthy nobles. When distinguished aristocrats died, their families would hold graveside bouts between enslaved people or condemned prisoners as a kind of macabre eulogy for the virtues the person had demonstrated in life. According to the Roman writers, Tertullian and Festus, since the Romans believed that human blood helped purify the deceased person's soul, these contests may have also acted as a crude substitute for human sacrifice. The funeral games later increased in scope during the reign of Julius Caesar, who staged bouts between hundreds of gladiators in honor of his deceased father and daughter. The spectacles proved hugely popular, and by the end of the 1st century BC, government officials began hosting state-funded games as a way of carrying favor with the masses. Number 3. They didn't always fight to the death. Hollywood movies and television shows often depict gladiatorial bouts as a bloody free-for-all, but most fights operated under fairly strict rules and regulations. Contests were typically single combat between 2 men of similar size and experience. Referees oversaw the actions and probably stopped the fight as soon as one of the participants was seriously wounded. A match could even end in a stalemate if the crowd became bored by a long and drawn-out battle. And in rare cases, both warriors were allowed to leave the arena with honor if they had put on an exciting show for the crowd. Since gladiators were expensive to house, feed, and train, their promoters were loath to see them needlessly killed. Trainers may have taught their fighters to wound, not kill. And the combatants may have taken it upon themselves to avoid seriously hurting their brothers in arms. Nevertheless, the life of a gladiator was usually brutal and short. Most only lived to their mid-20s, and historians have estimated that somewhere between 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 bouts left one of its participants dead. Number 4. The famous thumbs-down gesture probably didn't mean death. If a gladiator were seriously wounded or threw down his weapon in defeat, his fate was left in the hands of the spectators in contests held at the Colosseum. The emperor had the final say in whether the felled warrior lived or died, but rulers and fight organizers often let the people make the decision. Paintings and films often show the throngs giving a thumbs-down gesture when they wanted a disgraced gladiator to be finished off. But this may not be accurate. Some historians think the sign for death may have actually been the thumbs up, while a closed fist with 2 fingers extended, a thumbs down, or even a waved handkerchief may have signaled mercy. Whatever gesture was used, it was typically accompanied by ear-piercing cries of either let him go or slay him if the crowd willed it. The victorious gladiator would deliver a grisly coup de grace by stabbing his opponent between the shoulder blades or through the neck and into the heart. Number 5. They were organized into different classes and types. By the time the Colosseum opened in 80 AD, gladiator games had evolved from freewheeling battles to the death into a well-organized blood sport. Fighters were placed in classes based on their record, skill level, and experience, and most specialized in a particular fighting style and set of weaponry. Most popular were the Thraces and Myrmidons, who fought with sword and shield. But there were also the Equites, who entered the arena on horseback, the Esidari, who battled from chariots, and the Demarcheres, who may have wielded 2 swords at once. Of all the popular gladiator types, perhaps the most unusual was the Retiarius, who was armed with only a net and a trident. These warriors tried to ensnare their opponents with their net before moving in for the kill, but if they failed, they were left almost entirely defenseless. Number 6. They only rarely fought against animals. The Colosseum and other Roman arenas are often associated with gruesome animal hunts. but it was uncommon for the gladiators to be involved. Tangling with wild beasts was reserved for the venatores and bestiari, special classes of warriors who squared off against everything from deer and ostrich to lions, crocodiles, bears, and even elephants. Animal hunts were typically the opening event at the games, and it wasn't unusual for scores of unfortunate creatures to be slaughtered in a single exhibition. 9,000 animals were slain during a 100-day ceremony to mark the opening of the Colosseum, and another 11,000 were later killed as part of a 123-day festival held by the Emperor Trajan in the 2nd century AD. While most animals were merely slaughtered for sport, others were trained to do tricks or even pitted against one another in fights. Wild animals also served as a popular form of execution. Convicted criminals and Christians were often thrown to ravenous dogs, lions, and bears as part of the day's entertainment. Number 7. Women also fought as gladiators. Historians are not sure when women first suited up to fight as gladiators, but by the 1st century AD they had become a common fixture at the games. These warriors may not have been taken seriously in the patriarchal Roman culture, but a few appear to have proven themselves in single combat. A marble relief dating to around the 2nd century AD depicts a bout between two women dubbed Amazon and Achilia, whom the inscription says fought to an honorable draw. Women also joined in the animal hunts, but their stint in the arena may have come to an end around 200 AD, when the Emperor Septimius Severus banned their participation in the games. Number 8. Some gladiators organized themselves into trade unions. Though they were regularly forced to come to blows in life-or-death combat, gladiators viewed themselves as a kind of brotherhood, and some even organized into unions or collegia with their own elected leaders and protector deities. When a warrior fell in battle, these groups would ensure that their comrade received a proper funeral and grave inscription honoring his achievements in the arena. If the deceased had a wife and children, they would also see that the family received monetary compensation for their loss. These were 8 uncommon facts about Roman gladiators. The Colosseum will never remain the same without them.